the API platform. We are, of course, thankful to the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for supporting us in this project. IDEA's API project is meant to connect, I think, researchers and subject matter experts, private sector professionals, as well as government officials to discuss and to build understanding, consensus on the ASEAN economic integration. This year, we are all still trying to understand the implication of COVID-19 pandemic and what it means to policy making in this region. We are asking the question as individual ASEAN member states devise and adopt policies to recover. What does it mean? Does it create convergence or divergence force to our region's integration efforts? So over the past 12 months, we have published quite a few reports on global supply chain, regional supply chain, digital logistics, migration, and also a paper on the ASEAN airline industry. With me is Ridha, the author of that briefing paper, ASEAN Integration Through the Skies. And we also have a very good lineup of speakers from the industry and also from the regulator. I wouldn't take too much of your time. I just want to also quickly mention that we will have another report launch this month on the 24th and 25th, where we will be also speaking along those lines, and the report will also showcase some of the topics I just raised, including ASEAN integration through the skies. So we hope you'll join us on the 24th and the 25th again. So without further ado, I will just introduce Ridha. Ridha is, just give me a sec. Okay, so I think Ridha, I'll pass the space to you.
Okay, thank you, Lau. So good afternoon, everyone, and good morning. We have a participant from Europe, and also good evening for participants from the US. I just saw the list that we have around 120 participants, and it's glad to be connected with you all from the world. So I will present my paper, the briefing paper on the ASEAN Open Skies progress. But before that, I will introduce myself briefly that I am a faculty member at the International Business Law Program at Universitas Prasetiya Mulya. It's an Indonesian university. So since the beginning of 2018, I play a role in the founding and development of airline space law studies. It's still rare in the country. And I'm affiliated with some of the aviation associations, such as European Air Law Association and German Aviation Research Society. And I also do consultancy and also an expert at International Institute of Aerospace Law, AeroHub in St. Petersburg. And in regards to ASEAN aviation, I'm involved at the European Union EASA ARISE Plus Civil Aviation project on enhancing passenger protection. So allow me to start the presentation. And after this, we will have 3 speakers that I will introduce you later on, who will give comments towards this briefing paper and also their perspective on how's aviation in the near future, especially during COVID and COVID-19 pandemic recovery. So allow me to share my presentation slide entitled ASEAN Integration Through the Skies, the current progress in preparation for 2015. So this, as I mentioned earlier, this presentation is based on this briefing paper, just recently new, published in October 2020. And I would introduce the ASEAN region for those who have not known it well. We have participants from Europe and also America. So ASEAN consists of 10 member states. And we have one of the biggest archipelagic in the world, Indonesia, and another one is the Philippines. So you could imagine that ASEAN aviation the ASEAN region rely on aviation. And in the West, we have Myanmar, Thailand now with a land border, but it doesn't mean that it does not need aviation for its integration. Why so? I would say that we have abundant of aircraft deliveries to the Asia-Pacific region. And even Asia-Pacific region ranked #1 in terms of aircraft deliveries until 2035. Well, the forecast was made before the COVID-19 pandemic, but I believe the forecast still lasts because of the increasing of demand of air transportation in Asia-Pacific region, including ASEAN itself. Now, this is the forecast that I mentioned, and IATA also projected that Asia-Pacific region will provide more than half of the new passenger traffic ride until 2035. So the market size will count 3.1 billion people by 2035. And two of the fastest growing global markets, as projected by IATA, is Indonesia, ranked 4th, with 135 million new passenger for a total 242 million. And the fifth one is Vietnam, with 112 million new passengers for a total of 150 million. I must say that this projection was made before COVID-19 pandemic as well, but I think this has a strong ground to be mentioned during this presentation. And the ASEAN economic, we have the ASEAN Economic Blueprint 2025, where it needs a seamless connectivity, including air connectivity, to connect 650 million people in ASEAN rapidly, seamlessly. So that's why aviation come, and its reliance towards this sector is undoubtful. Now, just a brief introduction that we have the Chicago Convention as the Magna Carta of the aviation law. And in the past, between states, we have bilateral agreement. Whereas during the Bermuda I and Bermuda II type agreement, it's mentioned about pricing, frequency, routes, and designated airports. So each of the member states, they negotiate each other. So it's quite rigid. An open skies agreement, as mentioned by late Professor Henry Wassenberg, everything is permitted unless what is expressly forbidden. So open skies mean freedom of air traffic carriers that is forbidden, and to business deals and practices which are forbidden. It means that there shall not be limitation on pricing. There shall not be limitation on frequency. There shall not be routes limitation, and also designated airports. All is open to the airlines to decide, as long as they have the fleet and also resources to do so. And we have 9 freedom of the air. But what I want to stress is ASEAN only takes until the 5th freedom of the air. So an airline can take passengers from its home country, for example, Thai Airways from Bangkok, deposit them at the destination, first destination in Singapore, it's another country, and then carry other new passenger to another destination, the 3rd destination, which means Kuala Lumpur or Malaysia. So during the transit in Kuala Lumpur, sorry, I mean Bangkok to Kuala Lumpur and Singapore, the airline has the right to embark new passengers besides disembarking passengers. So it means that there are passengers coming in and coming out. And the airlines must originate or end at the national of the airlines itself. So Thai Airways either starting or ending in Thai soil. And this is the recent update on the ratification of ASEAN member states, that it consists of 3 main multilateral agreements. First one is full liberalization of air freight services. The second one is the multilateral agreement on air services. And the third one is full liberalization of passenger air services. We have dates, etc. At the far right, we have in force since, we could see either 2009 and 2011. But what I would like to stress is ASEAN Open Skies means if all member states have ratified the same multilateral agreement. So the effect goes to all of the member states. So in terms of the first one, de facto, even though it's written in force in 23rd November 2009, it's to November 2015, where Indonesia became the last member states ratifying it. And the second one is also 1 year later, 11 March 2016, with the Philippines as the latest signatories, or the states who ratified it. And the third one about multilateral agreement on the full liberalization of passenger air services, which I think is the most sensitive one besides the other two. It's in force since 7 April 2016. So 6 years after 2011, by having Indonesia and Laos as the last ratifying state. And also bear in mind that this region has a traffic rights agreement with China. So between China and all ASEAN member states, we already have the ASEAN and China open skies, which allow fifth freedom of the air since 2019, or last year. Now, let's see what the next freedom of the air, the sixth freedom of the air. So an airline can carry passenger or cargo between two foreign countries, provided that the aircraft touch down in the airline's home. We also call it as the Dubai freedom of the air, like the Middle East airlines that they use this kind of business model to develop their airports. But I think, like for example, Brunei, they could connect Manila and Yogyakarta via its home country, Bandar Sri Begawan. But I think this is quite far, and there has not been any discussion yet towards the sixth freedom of the air. I mean, in a good, in a positive way. The higher the number, the more sensitive. So if the sixth freedom is itself is that sensitive, then it's the same story goes with the seventh and eighth freedom of the air. Whereas it already happened in the European Union, that the 7 means an airline can carry flights that originate in a foreign country, bypass its home country, so without touching its home country. So it means that Wizz Air is taking the Warsaw National Airlines, the Polish National Airlines, and also Italian National Airlines by flying between the two countries. And more sensitive one is about, we also know it as the cabotage, like the eighth freedom of the air, that an airline can carry passenger from one point in a country to another point within the same country that originates in the airline home country. Skyline could fly from Amsterdam to Bremen and then pick up passengers to Berlin, but that's too sensitive. And without doubt, the ninth freedom of the air is also too sensitive, that an airline could fly in a foreign country and carry passenger from one point to another within the foreign country. So it does not touch down its home country. For example, Brussels Airlines could fly between Paris and Toulouse as long as there is a market for them. They want to fly. They got the a good slot allocation, timing with that. Nothing wrong with that. So just fly, just do the business. But 6, 7, 8, and NINT is not the ASEAN way until now. So how to integrate this ASEAN region? There are some barriers. First, we know that we are limited in one way, we are limited until up to the fifth freedom of the air. In the second column, foreign direct investment restriction in airlines with an ASEAN member state varies, so it's not harmonized. We could see that Brunei, Indonesia, Myanmar, Singapore, and Thailand provide 49% foreign ownership is allowed, while Malaysia is a little bit more liberal. Sorry, not Malaysia. Laos is is more liberal with allowing 100% foreign ownership allowed, like Cambodia. But this variation or this unharmonized foreign ownership limitation brings to a difficulty in determining an ASEAN community carrier, as the EU region has. So And the second issue shall be the conditions for airline regarding minimum aircraft in operation. So you have the foreign ownership cap, and the second one is minimum aircraft in operation. Like Cambodia, they provide, the law provides that an airline operates minimum 1 aircraft. So that's easy. Malaysia also, minimum 1 aircraft. Whether it has the economic scale of return, that's their business, that's the business model. But Indonesia, is the toughest with 5 aircraft in operation and 5 craft owned. It means that 5 in possession means a leasing, let's say. But you need to have 5 other aircraft to be owned. And Vietnam itself, there is no further detail on that, but they cap it with a capital. So if you have up to 10 aircraft, then you need to have 300 billion VND, the currency. So just an update by last month. This is a wonderful news in terms of harmonization because the Indonesian aviation law is being amended through the omnibus law method. And one of the goal is to reduce the minimum aircraft in operation. So far, it's still being determined by the Ministry of Transport. No number so far, but I believe it will be less than 10. 10, this is only for scheduled airlines, the highest, 5 owned and 5 in possession. So I've talked about ASEAN community carrier. So there is a need to revive the ASEAN community carrier that it's an ASEAN airlines. So it's just like a pan-ASEAN airlines. So how to set up a ASEAN community carrier? This idea has been silenced during the ASEAN Air Transport Meeting Group by the ministries, the high officials in 2017, because I think it touched control and ownership. It is too sensitive for some member states to allow more than 49% ownership to be owned by foreigners. So I think I would not touch the control and ownership, but this paper would like to suggest that what is the benefit? What are the benefits by having an ASEAN community carrier? So first, it's about slot priority. This idea is still raw, but an ASEAN carrier could have a slot priority in a new airports or in a congested airport, whereas the grandfather slot rights remains or alive there. And the second one is about subsidy. So it's about cross-border subsidy. That's possible. Well, we need to find out the way because the discussion has not been started. But if we say about possibility, yes, it's possible to subsidy not only the airlines, but also the airports. Which kind of airports? One of the suggestions is the remote airports. Let's say in Europe, you cap 5 million passenger per annum, or in average between the last 2 or 3 years, 5 million passengers per annum. So we could take a look at that kind of model and let's see whether it helps. Because let's say connectivity in ASEAN. I'm living in Jakarta. I need to travel to Vientiane, Laos, but there's even no direct flight to there. So if you could imagine that flying from capital to another ASEAN capital is difficult, how about people living in rural areas? They also have the same rights for transportation to reduce their travel budget, etc. But it's very hard for them, some of the places to travel. So this method perhaps could help to promote or encourage ASEAN seamless connectivity. So far, we have the 3 pan-ASEAN airlines, I would say. AirAsia Group has invested in 4 ASEAN member states. Lion Group has invested in 3 ASEAN member states. And last but not least, Vietjet has invested in 2 ASEAN member states in order to grasp each domestic market to establish a seamless connectivity between their ports or their airports. But in another way around, it means that they need to comply with all of the nation laws. So different minimum aircraft requirement, foreign ownership, which means costly. And this is a way how to deal with the maximum, I would say, in ASEAN as at the moment, fifth freedom of the air, because 6 until the 9th, I think it will be not possible in the near future because of the sensitivity of control and ownership, and also from defense perspective, a lot of issues is happening here. So what is the breakthrough? In 2018, the ASEAN introduced the ASEAN Open Skies Protocol 4. So it means that the Philippine Airlines from its home country could fly between two points within another ASEAN member states, flying from Manila to Manado. But in Manado, the airline could only disembark the passengers. So no embark new passengers. So the flight from Manado to Bali, it could be half empty or totally empty. And while after landing in Bali, they could use the other freedom of the air to get back to Manila, or using the fifth freedom, whatever it is. So it's a triangle, etc. But this is one of the breakthrough. 6 member states have ratified. In this case, Indonesia have not ratified. But they only have made reservation that if it is ratified, it's only open for 5 cities. And I think that's quite realistic, because Indonesia is one of the biggest aviation country with in terms of domestic passenger, with 90 million passengers per annum, while the international flights is only about 20 million. So it makes sense that the government would like to protect the national carrier. But to find the equilibrium, people or ASEAN citizens also must be preserved to, or must be safeguarded on their rights to travel. So from economic point of view, it's not a cabotage, because there shall not be a selling ticket between Manado and Bali with the Philippine Airlines, but only from physical perspective, the aircraft itself, yes, that's a cabotage flying from Manado to Bali. So 2 years have passed and 6 member states have ratified. So this is also another example that from VMT, Lao Airlines could fly to Vietnam in Hanoi to disembark passengers, but not embarking passengers. And then the aircraft itself will fly to another point in Vietnam, or Ho Chi Minh. So I would come up with my brief conclusion and the way forward. So this is from the paper that I would like to make it short. That first, there's an urgency for the ASEAN Transport Working Group to restart the discussion on ASEAN community carrier. But please do not focus only on ownership and control restrictions, which is deemed sensitive for some ASEAN member states. That there are other benefits from a community carrier that can be addressed without raising ASEAN member states' reluctancy, such as slot priority scheme across specific ASEAN airports that need to be defined later on if this idea is accepted. And the second one, in parallel, the ATWG should also review the minimum aircraft requirements. So this issue will touch all ASEAN member states' aviation law. We know that it's hard to amend a law, but as a blessing in disguise, by last month in Indonesia, there is an opportunity to reduce the number of minimum aircraft requirement, because we now, Indonesia now has the highest number in terms of barrier. So investment-friendly provision among the ASEAN member states shall lead to new airlines establishment. And investment-friendly does not also means with this law, but also the environment who support it, like the MRA and also the MRO, etc. So that will bring us to a seamless air connectivity ASEAN. So this situation could encourage a better intra-ASEAN connectivity, especially, I'm stressing it, flights serving remote and underdeveloped region or cities, because people there, they also have the right, same right like us living in the capital, some of us perhaps living in the capital, to fly seamlessly and also with the same price. So at the end, it's not only about airlines, but it's also about developing the airports. And last but not least, it's about the passenger benefit itself. So by that slide, I would like to end my presentation. So thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to have a discussion with you during the Q&A session later on. And this is my email address if you need to contact me further. Thank you. Terima kasih. So it's quite a tough job because after presenting, I will also moderating this session. And before we go to the Q&A session, we will have 3 speakers commenting on the brief paper and also what will be the future of ASEAN Open Skies through their perspective. We have 3 speakers. The first one, allow me to introduce them briefly, is Mr. Sokotong Forapet, or Sok, I will call him shortly.
Hi.
Hello, Sok. I will read your CV first. So please be patient before you're presenting. So
Okay.
he has been employed as a government official since 2009 at the Department of Civil Aviation, Ministry of Public Works and Transport, Laos PDR. And he was promoted to Deputy Director in April 2013 and subsequently promoted to be a Director of the division in late August 2019. So congratulations. So this is the interesting fact that he graduated a higher diploma of building engineering, but he turned his career from engineering background to aviation industry after he completed a graduate certificate of air traffic controller under JICA scholarship in 2009. So then in September 2019, he graduated advanced master in civil aviation management from ENAC, so excuse my France, École Nationale d'Aviation Civile, or the French Civil Aviation University, and Hong Kong International Civil Aviation Academy. Currently, he's in charge of air transport economics, negotiating bilateral and multilateral agreement, and also slot allocation management, including landing permit and market analysis. So Mr. Sok will represent the government perspective. Second one, we have Mr. Calvin Lee. So he's the Assistant Director of Member and External Relations for the International Air Transport Association, or IATA, based at the Asia Pacific Regional Office in Singapore. IATA is the trade association for the world's airlines, representing some 290 airlines, or 82% of total air traffic. And IATA itself supports many areas of aviation activity and helps formulate industry policies on critical aviation issues. In his role, Calvin looks after aviation policy and regulatory developments, which includes supporting the effort in promoting regulatory harmonization in this region. So it's already being stressed, the harmonization within this region. In light of the COVID-19 situation, one of his current focus is the coordination of IATA efforts to support the industry restart in the region. Mr. Calvin Lee will present after, with the airline's perspective, will present after Mr. Sokotong. And last but not least, we have Dr. Jae Won Lee on board. So he's an assistant professor in the Faculty of Law. He has been working, teaching, and researching in the field of aviation law and policy since 2004. His main research and teaching interests are aviation and competition law. So Professor Lee has 7 years of legal affairs experience in the airline industry, advising the company on issues relating to company liability, government regulation, and competition law matters. Since 2012, he has also acted as legal advisor to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea on aviation law issues and regularly attended the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, legal committee as a Korean delegate. Professor Lee has published on various aviation legal issues in both major air law journals and other leading journals of trade law. and public international law. And he has served or is serving as a consultant or expert to government and international agencies, including the European Union Aviation Safety Agency, or EASA, IATA, and the Hong Kong Competition Commission. And at the end, his edited book, Aviation Law and Policy in Asia, Smart Regulation in Liberalized Markets, will be published next month. So congratulations on that, Dr. Joy Woonley. I hope there's no further ado on the publication. So without further ado, I would like to present the stage to Mr. Sokotong Vorapet from Laos PCA to present his slides. Please take your time.
Good morning and good afternoon for everyone. I just want to share you the presentation.
Yeah, please. I could see it clearly.
Okay. First of all, regarding the ASEAN Open Skies, Laos PDA has been actively participating in the liberalization for quite long too. On the other hand, we also need to look up on the experiences implemented by the EU and also the other ASEAN member states as well. So in this case, I just want to provide you the information for the overview of the Laos PDRs and then how we implement the air transport liberalizations, and then what the implementations of Laos PDR towards the ASEAN agreement, and then the conclusion will be at the end of the presentation. For those who have already known Laos, Laos PDR also located in the center of the Southeast Asia, especially known as the Indo-China. So we have the borders, to 5 countries, Cambodia, China, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam. Normally, we have been a member of the ASEAN since 1997, and then also access to the WTO on the 3rd January 2013. The GDP for 2019, we reached from 16 to 17.96 billion. So in this case, based on that number, we also can attract more the airlines, flying into Laos. So far, we have got 21 foreign air carriers and 2 Lao carriers, operating the flights into Laos before the COVID-19, before March 2020, before the lockdown that we, suffering from the COVID-19. And
Excuse me to interrupt you. So could you kindly put your camera on if it's possible with the internet connectivity? Thanks.
Yes, okay. Yes, it's like so. And then let me see how can it work. Okay, perfect.
Perfect.
Okay, sorry. Okay, and then we also connected to 7 countries, especially Cambodia, Phnom Penh, and Siem Reap. China, we have about 14 points, Malaysia, Singapore, South Korea, Thailand, and Vietnam. But I just want to highlight on 3 points only, because we use as a hubs to connect to the other regions. And also we, based on the numbers of the flights, like 4 to 7 flights daily, which is Vientiane to Bangkok, Vientiane to Kunming, and Vientiane to Seoul. And in terms of how Laos connect to the other regions, through Bangkok hubs, Kunming, Guangzhou, Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, and Seoul. Although we are planning to operate the direct flight from Vientiane to Japan, we are still, considering like how, economic benefits would gain. So in this case, I just want to highlight 3 points that mentions like Kunming, Bangkok, and Seoul. Yeah. And for the hubs, we normally we connect to Singapore, Bangkok, Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh, and Malaysia. Based on the number of the flights and also the passengers movement. For example, that if Lao people or even foreigners living in Laos and they want to connect to Laos or the other countries, where they normally use, for example, the AirAsia through Kuala Lumpur. Sometimes they also fly with Singapore Airlines through Singapore, while Bangkok and Hanoi also become popular for the connecting flights to Europe, to America, and also like in United States and also Canada. I just want to highlight the number of the airlines, 21 airlines, especially the airline from China, because normally they are implementing the ASEAN-China agreement, and the designated airlines from China also based on or under the ASEAN framework. While Thailand also become as the second country that implementing that agreement quite effectively, especially Thai AirAsia and also Bangkok Airways and Thai Smile, that they are using the ASEAN framework as well. While we have got Seal Air and Scoot, in fact, like Scoot also replace Seal Air because of the, in terms of the economic loss. The market between Laos and Singapore is quite minimal because the high seasons between two countries are significantly different between summer and winter. So that's why there's sometimes at the one flight full load from Laos, but on the return or inbound flight also empty seats. Currently, in terms of the charter flights that we have got, and Laos PDA also banned all international flights flying into Laos, and also the flights also subject to the pre-approval. So in this case, at least we have some charter flights that connected to Laos, especially from Chongqing to Vientiane, Guangzhou, Kunming, those three Chinese airlines, and Bangkok to Vientiane, or sometimes only that one. But for the Kuala Lumpur, we also have the one flight from World Food Program that fly and operate every Sunday weekly. And for the Vientiane to Seoul, we also have three airlines, that Tivay, Jeju, and Lao Airlines, that they also have got some, flight connections. That allow foreigners who would like to come back to Laos and under the pre-approval anyway. Okay, and soon we're gonna allow Vietnam Airlines to fly the charter flight from Hanoi to Vientiane, and in this case, Lao Airlines also will participate as well. The whole countries, we have got 11 domestic and international airports, but we have got only 4 international airports. That the biggest one will be Vientiane, and the second one Luang Prabang as the UNESCO World Heritage City. While the third place will be Champasak, which we have got Wat Phu, the ancient Khmer temple, and also the Savannah Gate is the last airport, the smallest as well. I just want to highlight our aviation infrastructure that we have got. Normally, the original fly into Laos, they prefer to fly into Wat Thai International Airport or Vientiane, and also Luang Prabang as the second. For the first, it was built in 1996, and then 5 years ago, the government also decided to have the expansion project, and then now the capacity from 1.5 million to 3 million, and they expect to reach that number 2028. But before the COVID-19 last year, we reached like 1.85 million passengers. So in this case, normally when before the COVID, we expect to reach 3 million in 2025. Before the time, like 3 years. However, after the COVID, we need to reaccess that number again. While Luang Prabang International Airport also just opened in 2013, the capacity they can handle the number of the passenger for up to 750,000 people. But luckily, I mean, based on the number of the tourists, especially from Korea, China, and also the European travelers, that they quite prefer to fly into Luang Prabang. I would say, like, for some cases, when foreigner talk about Laos, they just remember that Luang Prabang something like. So the capacity reached like 850,000 people last year. So in this case, our Lao government also considering what way that we need to expand that airport, which is they also have the constraint that because that airport also nearby the city, and also like the land management is quite become their constraint too.
Okay,
so in Laos, we have
interrupt yourself. You have 7 minutes left, so hopefully you could get to the aviation policy of the country. Thank you.
Oh. And then we also have 2 airlines that in that kind, like Lao Airlines also have like 4 fleets for the Airbus 320, and then another one we have got Lao Skyway. Normally, basically they operate for the domestic one. Yeah. And before the COVID-19, we were quite happy with the tourism growth, that 9% in 2019 and reached like 468 million arrivals. And that kind of things, we also put the campaigns like Lao China tourist year, and we got like 1 million Chinese arrival last year as well. In this case, I just want to mention about the capacity of the Wata International Airport that we have got. Last year, from normally we reached like 8.5% growth rate, but last year we got like 11% that you have seen. So that kind of thing also reached like 1.85. And before we expect that, based on the World Tourism Organization, we think we expect to get 5 million in 2028. So that one also can consistent with the airport capacity. In terms of the ASEAN, I just want to mention that we all, ratify the, essential ASEAN instruments already. And I just want to highlight that just only 3, some airlines from three ASEAN member states and also ASEAN China operating flights under ASEAN. And ancillary services, which have got like 13 service sectors. The ASEAN investor have not yet, expressed their interest to invest in Laos. I think that because of, as I mentioned, that other methods that insufficient demands, local transportations and infrastructure. And the tourism and transportation transaction costs. I'm talking about like when they compare between spending their trip in Laos and other countries. If Laos more expensive than the other, so their intention still considering the other countries. So that in this case, we also working with the tourism sectors and also hotels and restaurants as well. In order to lower down the transaction costs. And the opportunities that we have seen from ASEAN is that we want to increase the number of the designated airline flying to Laos. And then because of the flexibility of the unlimited frequency and points, I think that that would be also become as an incentive. To co-chair, before the COVID, in fact, we have got the interest from some ASEAN airlines that they want to work with the domestic flights that they can, for example, that Thai Airways can send their passenger from Bangkok to Vientiane and to Luang Prabang. So while Vientiane to Luang Prabang, also using Lao Airlines and other airlines that operating something like. And I would say like considering the implementations of the ASEAN policy, it's about the obligation as well. Sometimes that it's not about the costs and benefits, but I think that we need to work on that. And before I end up with my presentations, I just want to highlight that the opportunity that we can see, we want to invite more, I mean, the investor to look at the services that still being the gap for Laos, especially line maintenance and ground handling services and leasing aircraft, in order to boost the local air carriers. And then in the next like 5 years, I think that general aviation business will be more boom. I mean, since that during this period, we can see like the private airlines also become more chosen by the customer. And one thing that after the COVID-19, I think we need to think about like how to building trust and also boosting aviation markets. I mean, and after that, we're also seeking for the new markets. For Laos, a part of the
sorry to interrupt you. Could you get into the conclusion?
Yes. And for the conclusions, and I just want to say that for Laos, we throughout 5 years, it's quite significant for Laos that we get the increasing number of the passenger. But some years also fluctuated. And then for the airport infrastructure, before we also plan to expand. But after COVID-19, we think that it needs to be improved for the services and also the capacity, but needs to be rethink about like how we expand. And the aviation sector, normally we need to work with the other transportation modes, especially railway will be, finished by the end of next year. So in this case, probably the railway can complement the airline and industry in Laos as well. Okay, thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Lau. Thank you, Sok. It's crystal clear from you. Now, without further ado, I would like to present the stage to Calvin. Please, the stage is yours.
Right, thank you very much, Ridha. I'm just going to share my screen.
All right, please.
Okay, I'd like to start off this update for the IDEAS webinar. So thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kelvin. I'm from the International Air Transport Association based in Singapore. Start off, I would like to actually introduce IATA, the International Air Transport Association, to everyone. We are the global trade association for the world's airlines, and we count some 290 passenger and cargo airlines as our members. Together, they represent about 82% of global air traffic. And our members operate a variety of business models. So some 65 member airlines operate a different business model from that of a full service carrier. We were founded in Cuba in 1945. So this year actually marks the 75th anniversary of our founding. And our head office is in Canada, with our Director General and CEO based in Geneva, Switzerland. And we also have regional offices around the world. And the regional office for Asia Pacific is in Singapore, where I'm based. Our mission is to represent, lead, and serve the airline industry. And the vision is to work together to shape the future growth of a safe, secure, and sustainable air transport industry that connects and enriches the world. So we have been talking about the impact of COVID-19, And actually, I wanted to share some numbers to illustrate the point. So every day in 2019, we saw some 106,000 flights each day that carried about 12.4 million passengers and about 17.8 billion worth of goods in air cargo. But as a result of COVID-19, now we are seeing only about 63,000 flights a day, and the number of passengers have also more than halved to 6.1 million, although the impact on air cargo is not as severe, as we still carry about 15 billion worth of goods every day. But this picture will then demonstrate why there is a very sharp dip in terms of the graph, as you would see, based on our 20-year forecast between 2019 and 2020. But despite this sharp dip, we are looking at air travel recovering to its 2019 levels by sometime in 2024. And we also forecast that the demand for air travel will rise above 7 billion over the next 20 years. So that's some 7.3 billion passengers in 2019, if you refer to the yellow line, which is the baseline, compared to 3.9 billion in 2019. And what this means for ASEAN is that today, aviation already makes a very major contribution to the economies of ASEAN countries. The air transport sector, as well as foreign tourists arriving by air, support some 8.5% of the GDP of the ASEAN countries. So this translates to about 256 billion in terms of gross value added contribution to GDP. And the air transport sector also supports close to 20 million jobs in the region. And we expect these numbers to only grow over the next 20 years because based on our 20-year forecast of passenger growth, we see that the growth is expected to move from the traditional centers in North America and Europe towards the East and the South. So if you look at this chart based on the color gradient, you'd see that Asia Pacific region is where global air travel is expected to grow very strongly, and ASEAN sits right at the center of this strong growth. And to give you some numbers to demonstrate the magnitude, you'd see that the numbers for Asia Pacific is way above those of the other regions today. And even in terms of the compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, at 4.5%, ASEAN and Asia Pacific's growth rate is much higher than that of North America at 1.6% and for Europe at 1.8%. So ASEAN is expected to play a very key role in the growth of the Asia Pacific region. And this is clearly seen in terms of the change in the top 10 air passenger markets between 2019 and 2039. So today, there is only one country in ASEAN that ranks amongst the top 10. So that's Indonesia at number 10. But Indonesia is expected to rise to fourth place by 2039 and displacing countries such as the United Kingdom, Japan, and Spain. Also, a second country in ASEAN is expected to join the ranks of the top 10, with Thailand expected to join by 2031 and eventually expected to rise to 8th position by 2039. So in terms of the aviation policy to support this strong growth that we are expecting, ASEAN is certainly moving in the right direction as encapsulated by the Kuala Lumpur Transport Strategic Plan to strengthen the ASEAN single aviation market. So we see that there is the ASEAN Multilateral Agreement on Liberalization of Air Services, which is a key component. And there are also other important parts such as the ASEAN Air Traffic Management Master Plan, as well as the mutual recognition arrangements. But for ASEAN to actually fully reap the potential of the expected travel growth, ASEAN will need to do more in terms of regulatory harmonization in order to overcome the key challenges that it faces, such as a very diverse landscape in terms of regulatory maturity amongst the ASEAN member states, There is also a lack of a unified pan-ASEAN political structure, unlike in some other regions, such as Europe. And we see that the government controls in the region remain quite conservative. So as ASEAN is built in the spirit of partnership and cooperation, we hope that ASEAN member states can work together to explore opportunities for greater regulatory harmonization. And it's not simply amongst ASEAN member states, but we also hope that ASEAN can work with the industry so that together we can bring about the expected strong growth in air travel for the region. And in terms of the impact of COVID-19 on the region, I just wanted to reiterate the very severe impact that COVID-19 has on the region. And this will also ultimately impact the overall long-term growth of air travel in the region, because travel in the region remains very restrictive. And it's only through the lifting of restrictions can we restore travel and demand and put ASEAN back on the trajectory, the very strong growth trajectory that we're expecting. So we also hope that the ASEAN member states can tap on this spirit of cooperation and partnership to explore more travel bubbles, including the potential for a pan-ASEAN travel bubble to really help the region reach its potential in terms of air travel growth. So with that, thank you very much for your time, and I'll hand the time back to Ridha. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Calvin. Much appreciated for your time. So allow me to invite the last but not the least speaker, Dr. Jae-Woon Lee. Please, the stage is yours.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jun Lee. It is my pleasure to speak at the Ideas the webinar. And also, I'd like to thank Ideas and Ridha for the kind introduction, kind invitation, sorry. Let me just start with my slide. And also, it's good to see a lot of familiar names, familiar faces. Okay, so my topic is regional liberalization in Northeast Asia and connectivity with ASEAN. So Ridha asked me to talk a little bit about the Northeast Asia and if there's any progress, but also trying to point out what are the issues as an outsider, non-ASEAN academic, non-ASEAN country, what are the key issues that ASEAN needs to address in the future. Let's just look at the more like zoom out. I mean, what are we talking about? We are talking about regional liberalization. Regional liberalization is ASEAN, single aviation market is part of regional liberalization. And as previous speaker already mentioned that bilateralism is obviously principal instrument for the air service. But we should not forget that we actually tried by global multilateralism, mainly by the ICAO, but it didn't really work out. It really didn't work out. They tried a lot, but realized it's not a topic that they can do in a bilateral manner. By the way, for those who are not too familiar with Zoom, I just want to mention that if you go to the top page and the view option, I would recommend side-by-side mode is most easy one to follow. So you can do that one. So the fact is there are many regional approaches. ASEAN is one of them. Of course, the European Union is most classic example, but you will also see that Latin America, Caribbean, League of Arab, Africa, many parts, they're doing regional approaches. Then you can ask why. I mean, okay, multilateral globalism didn't work at all, but why regional approaches are different? Maybe it's because we're talking about small number of states and more connectivity, more commonalities, and the level of integration. And you also discuss air service with a more broader market integration. This is why, probably why, regional liberalization is happening all around the world. And very briefly, I'll just talk about the update on Northeast Asia. I mean, short answer is nothing is happening, but it's good to remind that what happened in the past. So say 2006 it started. It's a so-called trilateral Northeast Asian open sky discussion started from Korea, and then for 5 consecutive years they had a meeting in Japan, Korea, and China. But then the meeting was halted mainly because of political tension. So around the time, the political relation between those 3 states was not too good, I can say. So then these discussions stopped. Having said that, bilateral way, there are quite good progress. So 2007, open sky between Japan and Korea. And I think I saw the question from the chat box and the role of LCC. I think we'll discuss in our Q&A session. The role of LCC was really significant in this Korea-Japan market. And market share of them was lower than 10%, but now more than 50–60%. So the demand was covered by the LCCs, and it's really classic example of how open sky agreement may impact on the traffic. Then China, Japan, so they have a quasi open sky agreement in 2012. I say quasi because 3 major cities were excluded. These are Beijing, Shanghai, and Tokyo. So, but we're just talking about the Osaka, Nagoya, Guangzhou, still major big cities. So you're more about secondary city, but when you say secondary city, we're talking about millions. So it is a major step. And China, Korea, so it's quite restricted among those bilateral, those 3 states. Only agreed Korea's Shandong province, Korean Hainan province, but there was some long story, but the short answer is gradually the capacity has been increased, but they haven't reached the open sky agreement yet. So this is what happening in Northeast Asia. The point I want to address is connectivity. So like ASEAN with external partners, so including China, Japan, Korea. So I think Ridha mentioned that the ASEAN made an agreement with China, and one first one is about third and fourth freedom, which is a Protocol 1, 2010, and interestingly, there's another one, the Protocol 2 on fifth freedom right. But at the same time, if you look at the cities that they can allow, they can travel, is not major cities. So yes, there are fifth freedom, but it's not commercially viable. I think on the China, the ASEAN market, I think we'll come back on during the Q&A session. The Japan ASEAN, so the discussion started in 2014. I think they're on the same page, except that Tokyo fifth freedom. So ASEAN wants fifth freedom, unlimited, via Tokyo Airport, Haneda, and Narita Airport. But Japan's view is that the fifth freedom to Tokyo is tricky one because it's going to give a strong advantage for ASEAN carrier in their view, bringing passenger from ASEAN via Japan, and you go to cluster market in United States. So unlimited fifth freedom to ASEAN countries is something the Japan couldn't agree. So this was sort of major reason why they couldn't agree on open sky. Similarly, this fifth freedom is also another obstacle for Korea. So same logic, if the Incheon airport is open for unlimited fifth freedom, then of course it's good for the airport, Incheon airport, because the more passengers will be arriving. But for national carriers, it could be a big threat. So bringing ASEAN passengers, so ASEAN airline coming from ASEAN, Southeast Asia, coming to Seoul and continue to go to major cities in the US. That could be a major threat. So this is the reason why Korea and ASEAN couldn't sign on the open sky agreement. At the same time, I have to mention that gradually on a bilateral level, the fifth freedom is becoming more generously given. More ASEAN states, at least on the air service agreement wise, they have a right to fly. It's not unlimited, different from third and fourth, but there are some rights the using fifth freedom. So I wanted to mention this part. So I think Calvin mentioned that one. If you really look at the ASEAN as a dialogue partner, what is going to be major challenge is that there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee that the agreement we sign, one country and as ASEAN as a group, there's no guarantee that this agreement will be implemented. This agreement will be ratified. Let's say Korea, you would like to have open sky agreement with maybe Indonesia in the ASEAN. So ASEAN signed with Korea, but Indonesia might not sign, till the end. In the meantime, other countries sign and then take advantage of the benefit given by the air service agreement. So if you compare EU, of course, this is major difference because the EU has supranational mechanism. So if you sign with the EU, you know that it's going to be implemented because EU has supranational power. So this coordination issue, I think the SUP mentioned that obligation of ASEAN member states to implement instrument. I find it very interesting. But when you say obligation, I think it's more not like legal obligation in my view. So we can discuss later. So the fact that the partner state cannot guarantee it is a major obstacle for them to proceed the open sky agreement with ASEAN. So last point, we have to also know that the importance of fifth freedom has been gradually decreasing. In my article a couple years ago, I pointed out, sorry, some drill now, but I'm fine. The three major points, there are, first of all, long-haul aircraft, as you know, the Dreamliner can go long haul, and then the sixth freedom. I mean, you work with the alliance partners. That's another thing. You don't need to. Your airline do not need to go further. You can just work with the local airline in the foreign destination. So these kind of factors actually may impact on the decrease of fifth freedom. But I'm interested in the impact of COVID-19 in the context of the fifth freedom. So I think quite same logic, the ASEAN Protocol 4, which is co-terminalization. So in that scenario, when the demand is very low, one way you can do is, okay, you are limiting the number of destinations of your aircraft, but you can continue to use fifth freedom. So maybe they start to reevaluate the fifth freedom, which was a bit underestimated, maybe underutilized before COVID-19. So this is something I want to point out, and I think I am on time. Thank you very much, and 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Jun, for your timely presentation. So it leaves us plenty of room for discussion. And we have some Q&A, interesting Q&A that I will address to the speakers and myself. So allow me to present the first one. The first question is Gabriela from Taylor's Unif, Malaysia. I would like to address it to Kelvin from IATA. So how about the growth of intra-ASEAN travelers since Open Skies policy? And how about the role of LCC? Is that significant, like Dr. Jae Woon Lee has mentioned during his presentation? And also, what are the steps for ASEAN airlines to improve their financial conditions? Because it's almost bankrupt, we've seen on the news. And is there any help from the government? Please give us your view, Kelvin.
Right. Thank you very much, Ridha. So I think I'll address the first question first from Ms. Gabriela. So as what we have seen is that there has been a growth in terms of intra-ASEAN travelers since the implementation of the ASEAN Open Skies. But as you would know, this ties in and goes hand in hand with the economic development of the region as a whole. So I think that it is firstly the open skies complementing or complemented by as well a rising middle class that has resulted in the number of intra-ASEAN travelers increasing. And I would think because of the pie growing bigger, there is actually a role for all kinds of airline business models to support this air travel growth in the region. So the LCCs will play an important role, but at the same time, full service carriers as well will continue to play a vital role in promoting ASEAN growth and integration. So that's my answer to the first question. And to the other two questions from Ms. Madika, I would say that as you read from the news, there are also many different commercial opportunities that airlines in ASEAN are pursuing. So firstly, focusing more on air cargo, for example, or even leveraging very diverse commercial opportunities such as dining for its customers because it's no longer flying. So ASEAN airlines are taking every step possible to improve their financial condition. But I think they would still need a lot of help from the government in terms of financial support to help them get through this very difficult time. So what the governments in the member states should think about is actually what I was talking about in terms of lifting restrictions. Because right now it's the lack of demand that is resulting in this difficult financial condition. So by looking at how they can lift restrictions, for example, through the setting out of travel bubbles, they will actually help to rebuild the demand that the airlines need to support them financially. So I hope I've answered all three questions.
Okay, thank you, Kelvin. I think it's interesting to talk about the government intervention or government help. So this is a question to Kelvin, June, and also Sokotong. Do you think the most favored nations rules apply or same treatment? Does the government only help the flag carrier, the state-owned, or what's the fate of the private airlines? Because most of the LCC are private and they play a significant role in establishing connectivity within the region. Perhaps, Kelvin, you could go first with this.
So when I look at support for the airlines, of course, financial support is one, but from the airline perspective, we think that there are a lot of different measures that the government can help. And so making sure that there are no onerous procedures, for example, for passengers to travel, will go a long way to support all airlines that operate in that country. So I would strongly emphasize that financial support is important, but as well as all these procedural restrictions that can be lifted, and then that will support the airline industry as a whole.
Thank you. And I'm going to the east first, June. So what's your view on this question? And there's also a question on delay and flight cancellation. How is it going there in the midst of COVID-19 in regards to this, the same question, please?
All right, so I got the question about, well, I'll answer the question delay, but then you have another question, is that? There's another question?
Yeah, how's the government helps government intervention towards the airlines? Is it only to state-owned, or what's the fate of the private airlines?
So well, I go with the question of anonymous attendee about the delay. I mean, short answer is the delay, flight cancellation, overbooking are based on national law so far, and EU is exception because they have a regional regulation. But this one, domestic law is governed by the delay cancellation. There are a lot of cases, a lot of development actually. There are, to be honest, this one is an area where law is trying to catch up because so many things go unexpected. So for that, answer cannot be comprehensive, but short answer is it's on the national law. Your first point is it's about competitive neutrality. The meaning is the government, when they support the airline, actually the principle is you support both state-owned airline and as well as the private airline, but it's obviously complicated. It is complicated because if there is the ownership, government ownership of the national airline, and are you going to support that as a government, or are you going to support them as a shareholder? So these also create interesting legal question. So normally promoting that when you do it, when you support the airline, it should be fair. But the problem is you cannot save them all. That's particularly financially, because we're talking about limited resource. So again, no answer, but I can see that at least kind of protectionism, which is maybe helping favorite child in your country. That's something I can see in the region for sure.
Okay, thanks for your insight, Jun. And I will go to Laos, Vientiane. How is it there, Sok?
I just want to answer for the first question for the most favorite nation, right? For the national flag carrier, I mean, in terms of the regulatory perspective, we think that if protectionism still exists, will also undermine the strengths of the, growth of national flag carrier. So in this case, in order to increase the competitions, within the countries and also the region too, we should gradually also increase the competitions among themselves. So what I mean is that the regulatory body needs to, for example, that if the liberalization will coming or pop up in the region, we know like how long that's going to happen. So in this case, we also need to inform them or notify them like how to increase the competitions, and also like I would say like competition in the case also help the national flag carrier in terms of the assistance, whether or not the government needs to help. I think that it also links to the economics relevant too. If the airline, the private sector, because the unemployment rate gonna happen if one airline also collapse. So in this case, the government needs to balance between like the financial obligations and also financial assistance to be consider. And in terms of the delay, cancellations, for us after the COVID-19, for the delay, it's really hard to manage because the passenger also needs to re-check in, and the system integration is really hard too. While cancellation, we also inform the airline like when they file their flight applications, please don't cancel, otherwise it's really hard for them to connect to Laos or the country.
Okay, so thank you. Let me give my insight from the Indonesian situation. Only the flag carrier got the body and in a convertible bonds because it's a public company. Because by the constitution, it's guarded that there must be one at least company, state-owned Garuda Indonesia, to connect the airlines because it's an archipelagic. How about the other private airlines? They get the money, the incentive, but not in terms of direct money, but in terms of a reduction of airport tax, company law, taxes, etc. There are debates on that, but as June said, and also Kelvin and Sok also mentioned that we could not save everyone. We could not make everyone happy, but what we could do is to make everyone less unhappy. So I think that's the situation during the COVID-19 pandemic. So let me go to the next question. I would like to discuss whether COVID-19 will amplify protectionism, or will it spur liberalization? I think that's a good question raised up by Adam Abdullah. So, Jun, you could go first, please.
Right. So I'm also trying to link with one of the questions like Jordan time. So it kind of related. So when you are setting up the aviation policy, even first of all, it's national policy. You decide your policy based on your national politics and many other factors. But within even one country, there are so many stakeholders. There are airlines, there are airport, there are passenger, and each one has a different voice. So when we talk, for example, we talked about fifth freedom. It's good for airport, no matter who you are coming to airport, you like it because you are giving money. Of course, openness is not, it can be a threat to national airline. And we have to say that for the long enough time, air service agreement has been discussed on national airline centric based. So what's the best benefit for national airline? Things have been changing before COVID-19. And we are talking about mega trend change because by 2019, we see clear liberalization, which has been changed dramatically. We are more open for what's the consumer benefit, what's the best for the consumer and bigger economy. I have to admit that in this survival mode in the airline in 2020, 2021, I think we are in a way going back to protectionism at least few more years. After that, we don't know, but that's something we will see in the survival mode.
Thank you, Jun. Can I go to you, Kelvin, please?
Right. Thank you very much, Ridha. So I think I will follow on from what Jun has talked about to link also the question from Jordan. Is that I think we are first looking at not just who sets the rules, whether it's who has a bigger voice, but what is more important for the airline industry is that the rules are globally agreed upon, because we believe in the airline business is after all a global business. So it's very important that all the rules should be globally agreed upon if possible. That's why we talked about the need for greater regulatory harmonization in ASEAN itself. So in terms of where this takes the region, I would also say that I hope that we see more of a common ground in terms of aviation policy, not just in terms of ownership and control, but for the entire sector, with agreement amongst all the ASEAN member states. And that will be the best case scenario for the aviation industry in ASEAN.
Okay, thank you, Kelvin. So I will address this also too. So, but I will add one question to you. So noticing the airlines fleet in Laos, which is not that much, and you have planned to boost tourism within the country like Luang Prabang and also other cities, and also mentioning that most of the tourists come to Laos from Thailand are by roads rather than by airlines, that you're trying to improve it. What's the policy of Lao Aviation? Do you at this stage, like they say that the COVID-19 is starting, will you focus on airlines or airports? Please, folks.
So far, like before our presentations, we also thinking about and also talking about with my boss as well. I mean, in the case, in the short term, we also focusing on the airlines. Because the capacity of the airports still able to handle, while working with, the other transportation mode of transportation also would boost the air transport as well. The reason why, it's not that really easy for those who are also traveling by boat, also border crossing, because some passenger who are from Bangkok or even like the other part of Thailand, they can get the tickets within I think that less than $100 US, so it's cheaper. So in this case, while if you're traveling from Bangkok, through the bus or whatever, in terms of their, adventure interest, it depends. So in this case, focusing, during the COVID-19, we're focusing on the airlines that to boost the demand first. The reason why, the borders is still closed and to is process risk, while the airport also become more prevalent for the government to control the COVID. So I think that in the short term, we focus on the airlines to boost the market first, and then we can check the COVID-19 and also assessment more better than the other mode of transport.
Thanks. So I also try to sum up good questions from the audience. in the midst of COVID-19, the time for restarting, is there any discussion in terms of airlines' balance sheet? Is there any plan to restructure it, or it's their business, so we just left them behind and perhaps just coordinate with the association like IATA rather than talking to us? Is there any effort to reform the laws on especially airlines and its balance sheet and also model, etc.? Like the Vietnamese that have done, they do not only put minimum aircraft requirement, that they also put that if you have up to 10 aircraft, then you need some certain of amount to ensure that this money, this hot money could be used in terms of emergency. Can I have your view on this, perhaps for the East Asia, June? Is there any, or is that too soon to talk about this?
This one, really, I don't have a crystal ball. It's so difficult to say what's the best benefit. Yeah, seriously, what we know is it's going to come back. It's going to rebound, and we experienced that. And we never underestimate the human beings' urge to travel. You know, it's so deeply embedded. I think once we have a sort of stable stage, we will see, you know, I think V-shaped return. That I can say expect, but of course when, how, I don't know. Yeah.
Thanks. And from the regulator perspective, is there any discussion on this in Laos, Sok? Or it's too soon also? If this question is too soon, isn't it?
In terms of like the bankruptcy of the airlines, I mean, it's going to be, but even before the COVID, in fact, but we are thinking about like how could government could, help the airlines in terms of, during this period. Yes, of course, I mean, the poor balance sheet also could define like what, how long that the airline could survive. At the same time, I mean, for us, I mean, because two airlines also the government, one is 70% government owned and the other 100%. So in this case, it's really hard to say that we should stop. But what we can do now, because of the number of the employments as well, and also the size of the industry. I mean, I'm also thinking about like what's the end of the aviation industry. But the answer is that, you know, like, because some countries that has got big scale of the aviation industry, so it's really hard for them to collapse. Otherwise, it's going to be a like recessions and other. So in this case, of course, I mean, we need to find a way out to help them. Yeah. Okay,
and the last speakers, Calvin, please respond. But I will ask you one question, if I may. Does IATA formally or suggest consolidation or merger as one of the exit? Please.
Okay, so maybe I will start off by I just want to echo what Suk had said. It's that I think regulators and the government should appreciate the importance of aviation to the economy as well as the number of jobs the air transport sector contributes. So that's why we think that government support is very crucial. But I think to Ridha, what you have just asked as additional question, it's we also think that we hope that government aid should not distort the competitive landscape, and that airlines should continue to be able to pursue growth based on whatever business model they think is best for them. So that's my answer to the two questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, before we discuss deeper into ASEAN community carrier, I would like to ask the best practice in East Asia, June. Do you have community carrier in East Asia region, or let's say discussion about it if it has not been implemented?
So first of all, there's no discussion among those three countries, but one thing quite similar to ASEAN, pan-ASEAN approach is probably Spring Airline Japan. So the idea they invented was you have a minority share from China, but you set up a joint venture with the majority share of Japan in Japan. So that's basically, when you're talking about pan-ASEAN, the airline, it's joint venture kind of stepping stone. Maybe in the future, 100% foreign-owned, ASEAN foreign-owned airline can set up in other partner states. But the model we have seen is about joint venture. So in Northeast Asia, it's only that one. The Spring Airline Japan is one. Ridha, sorry, but can I just answer the who owns question? This is so important because
Please.
It's about sustainability agenda still on the front. So actually, this is probably really important question. I mean, when the market is not happening, when demand is really low, what regulator can think of is what's next? What's really next? Because it's been incredible 10 years. It's been so fast moving 10 years. So 2020, open the next couple of years, really time to think that what can be done in terms of sustainability. I think this topic should be the main agenda in any other discussion.
All right, thanks, Jun. And how about Lau? Are you ready for ASEAN community carrier, or what's your views on ASEAN Open Skies Protocol for? Will it benefit tourism, but not protecting the national airlines, or the other way around? Please, your views.
I just want to say that and go back to the transparency of implementations of agreements. In this case, during the COVID, I would say like protectionism is quite haven't heard about. I mean, you know, like for example, if you have the bigger airport, I mean, more than Laos, like more than 3 millions. Do you think that you want to welcome more airlines? I mean, fly into Laos more flights? While in order to subsidize or even like you know, reach even point, I mean, for the airport costs. However, for Laos, I think that we are quite transparent. I mean, more and more. I mean, if you don't allow some certain airline, I mean, flying to Laos, I mean, of course, I mean, like based on the agreements and based on the, you know, like obligations of the treaties or whatever, it's going to be bound backs. Yeah. And the other thing is that I would say like for the ASEAN community allies, I mean, it's quite new for us. I mean, but if the ASEANs, I mean, in certain time, we're gonna reach that kind of thing. I think that it's sooner or later we might be as I mean EU anyway. And the other thing is that in terms of open up, I mean, for liberalization, right? If you don't open for the more flights, and of course, I mean, when more flights coming in, the risk of the COVID is also increasing as well. How we could implement the new normal of you know, like new aviation. So I think that the way that we could survive, I mean, especially for the aviation, we need to have the certain things, especially Laos. We don't. I would say, like in terms of my personal, I mean, point is that we don't want to overcome yet because the healthcare system in Laos is quite compared to the other, it's really weak, I would say. While if it's kind of like the second or the third wave, it might be affect the economy. It's like the government needs to lock down again. Anyway, yeah. I mean, open but have certain new normal approach.
All right, thanks, Doug. And Calvin, what's IATA view? Has IATA been advising on the co-terminalization or protocol for itself within the region? Please, Calvin.
Yeah, so I think for us as from the airline industry, we think that the entire KLTSP, the strategic plan to build that single aviation market, is very important. So every step that ASEAN makes in terms of progress towards the single aviation market will help it reach the potential growth that we expect. So I think every step is important. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Calvin. So let me highlight that the ASEAN region, to all of the presenters, is quite different than the EU in terms of the EU has a court of justice, but ASEAN has not. So there are questions on state aid or subsidy. So in ASEAN, it means that 10 national rules applies because there is no court that could say, hey, state A, you're doing it wrong, or hey, state B, please revise the aid you've given to the airlines, airport, etc. So that's the first one. So I would stress that it means that 10 national laws apply. So then subsidy laws, whether and also in combination with the competition laws also apply. And it's hard when it's mentioned to a cross-border flight in terms of a anti-competition. So we learned from the EU. One of the best that I would like to learn from the EU is how to protect the weak. I mean, those living in the rural areas, because airport with less than 5 million passengers per annum would have the right to get a state air or subsidy. So it's not only the airline, but it's the airport that should develop themselves. Now, I will go back to an interesting question that, so at the end, shall be the best for ASEAN in terms of freedom of the air. So I will ask briefly to all of the presenters, do you think fifth freedom of the air plus protocol for co-terminalization is enough? Or should ASEAN move to the sixth freedom of the air? But I think 7, 8, and min is quite sensitive. So let me ask you the question from Laos first. What's your view on that?
Okay, based on the national policy, we would like to transform ourselves, to the land-link country, but subject to the fifth freedom traffic rights so far. In terms of the protocol 4, in effect, I just want to answer this question first. It's quite like the Scoot airlines that flying into Laos, that they're using like terminalization, like flying from to Vientiane to Pabang and go back to Singapore. I think this protocol, in the short term, during the COVID-19 might be applicable. For during this period, while for more liberalization, I think that probably the ASEAN needs to work on that. Whether or not, but it takes some time to do so, because it's not about the protectionism, but like even Laos, we haven't been familiar with, for example, the sixth freedom. Even we give some to some countries. Yeah. Anyway.
All right, thank you. And what's IATA view towards this? Can I have your thoughts which freedom of the air is best suit for ASEAN in these hard times and in the future? Calvin, please.
Yeah, thank you, Ridha. I think as the airline industry, we're not really in a position to tell ASEAN what they need to do in terms of freedom of air. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So let me see from East Asia perspective. So Jun, from East Asia experience and also the EU, what do you suggest for the ASEAN?
Right. So I spent
freedom of the air.
So for ASEAN. My view, never underestimate what they've achieved. The ASEAN made a really, really good success. The magnificent success on full liberalization on third and fourth. It is something you should be proud of. This is not about whether or not question. It's about to what extent question. So it's not. So we're not talking about fifth, sixth, the rest. It's really up to. It's not about only internal liberalization. You eventually talk about external fifth freedom, external seventh freedom for the partner state. So it's good to discuss. I have to be realistic though. Seventh freedom, the rest are difficult to have, and it's really helpful to continue to discuss. But to be honest, I'm not expecting to be realized anytime soon.
All right, thanks, Jun. So now, last question for you, Jun. Please stay tuned. ASEAN has already a multilateral agreement, an open skies agreement with China. Do you think East Asia and ASEAN is ready?
So, okay, this is like another level. In the beginning of my presentation, we talked about regional liberalization.
Yeah.
And if things are going forward, maybe you can see the inter-regional the discussion, which is happening in EU and ASEAN, because these are ones who are making good progress. But for the East Asia, Southeast Asia, next slide.
perhaps this question is gone too far because just for your information that many ASEAN nationals who would like to travel to US or Canada, usually they, if not in Bangkok or Singapore, they transit in either Hong Kong or Japan or even Korea. So, well, this question will lead to the benefit of the passenger because by doing that, does it mean that cheaper price, more options, etc., for the passengers? And for Calvin, do you have any closing remarks on this session, please?
Thank you, Ridha. So I think my closing remarks would be that we continue to be very positive about the future air travel growth for ASEAN. But I think in light of the COVID-19 situation, the very important next step is to first look at how the region can lift the travel restrictions so that travel demand can be restored. Otherwise, the growth will not come back quickly. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Calvin. And so from Laos, do you have any closing remarks, please? The floor is yours.
As aviation regulator, we're also working hard with two ministries, actually, in fact, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also like Ministry of Public Health. We think that based on their assessment, I mean, the aviation industry would recover as soon as possible, at least, I mean, step by step. And of course, I mean, based on the airport and also the measures to do so, it needs to have certain things to control the COVID-19 and also boost the air transport as well. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So let me provide a brief conclusion and the closing remarks. And also mentioning to the last question by Professor Martono from Indonesia, the question shall be, how's the implementation? It's a little bit a national question. ASEAN multilateral agreement by Indonesia, taking into account the national aviation law. So first, ASEAN, noticing we have an ASEAN way, it's hard to regulate or to say another country is wrong or even though to become the watchdog to another country. So it means that 10 national aviation laws apply, 10 national foreign investment law applies, and also 10 competition laws. But luckily, we managed to have all of the member states to sign the fifth freedom of the air. Now it's time for restarting in many sectors and including in aviation. So it's a time to get a flashback whether we have done it well, not only from airline and airport perspective, logistic perspective, but usually passenger perspective, passenger benefit is left behind. So at the end, it comes into a conclusion that whether we should have reviving the idea of an ASEAN community carrier, but with focus not to touch the ownership and control issues because that's quite too sensitive. But talking about the benefit, first determining that some airlines flying intra-national remote region and also remote airports could benefit them. So that will be a further discussion. And the second one is about slot priority. But the ATWG, the Air Transport Working Group, if they decided to, they need to work hard because it's hard to define what is an ASEAN carrier. Does it mean that 100% must be owned by ASEAN nationals, 51%, 49%? And how about cross-border that one national have less than the other ASEAN member states in its respective country? So I think this is a good time to revive this discussion. And last but not least, we have a development in Indonesia that, as I mentioned earlier, that there is an omnibus law. So they try to reduce the minimum aircraft requirements. So it's a bottom to top approach in terms of harmonizing minimum aircraft requirements. And also good for investment, but you also need to address the environment like the MRO, the MRO agreement, etc. And as the biggest domestic market in the region, Indonesia is quite protective on multilateral agreement that during the ASEAN Open Skies Protocol 4, it's the only country to mention that if Indonesia signs or ratify it, then only 5 cities could be open, 5 big cities. It means that the other are closed for this kind of flights, even though there are some pro and cons about it, but that's the fact. That's written within the multilateral agreement. So I would like to thank all of the speakers from East to West, perhaps. So Jaewon Lee first, and then Kelvin in Singapore. I believe you're in Singapore, and also Soki in Vientiane in Laos. And thank you for all of the questions by the attendees. I hope we could meet again in another session. And allow me to give this floor back to Lau, please.
Well, thank you very much, Ridha, for presenting and also moderating the session. I think, Ridha, you've worked extremely hard to put this together, helping us out with the invitation and everything. And I should also take the opportunity to thank our speakers, Dr. Lee, Suk, and also Mr. Kevin Lee, for sharing, for providing very insightful sharing and helping us, equipping us with the tools and concepts to understanding what it takes for the next stage of ASEAN integration through the skies. And I should also thank our audience for participating and also providing your questions. Some of them are quite thought-provoking, I should say. If you like our content, if you'd like to see more of this, reports and also webinar recordings, please head to our website at www.ideas.org.my and also follow us on our social media so that you'll get notified each time there's any new reports and also events, including webinars. So hope to see you guys again and have a good week ahead. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.